solvency.
2 off.
Yep.
And case.
In case in order of trafficking, cat, solvency. So order of the You all good? Austin, did you need the flash drive back or you?
Yeah. Yeah, once you have it, can I?
Oh, yeah. Can you roll it back again?
Sure thing. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The thing about y'all's is like it looks unusual, so people are less likely to accidentally keep it. Mine just looks like everybody's flash drive. It's the worst. Just let me know when you're good, Austin.
I'm good. Go for it.
Judge, ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. First off is the K. Focusing on liberation requires reaffirmation of animality to justify the liberation of those the affirmative targets which re-entrenches speciesism. Chem 9. It is defending humanity of life. People requires reaffirming animality of animals. Their categorical subordination. Women and animals are both the victims of male violence. Response to interdependency, blankness, and animalness is not to deconstruct other nations, but vigorously affirm the blacks are human and deserving of better treatment than animals. It is the narrative that embraces the ideology of human supremacy in the name of fighting white supremacy and sees no contradiction. Categories of the differences saturate our thinking, our discourse, our experience, and our actions. And the affirmative's appeal for human rights is fundamentally exclusive. It perpetuates and legitimizes speciesism. 98. Humanism is a centrist human, not naturalism. Humanism is a proactive, positive, pro-human, so whereas naturalism is more general and includes non-human animals to exclude them. Second, humanism is a way of life-centered non-human interests and values. The word human appears in so many principles. This specificness seems to hardly accidental, and though hierarchy with humans does not describe the view of the human at the center puts animals a much subordinate. The overwhelmingly strong focus on human interests seems the only human rights arguments humanists would accept are instrumental as animals are viewed as the means of our ends for our development, our way of life. And there's something egocentric various species in the anthropocentricity of this view of biggest pleasure and improves the quality of lives to injure and kill animals. That would be justified on instrumental grounds. It seems humanism must condone sport hunting, and there's an instrumental bias in favor of speciesism. The app's failure to directly challenge it allows hegemonic discourses to constrain parameters of discussion and political activity, which allows speciesism to continue. Jackman 94. Institutionalization of expropriative argument arrangements yields multiple advantages. Institutions limit opportunities for and raise the cost of non-compliance. Adaptive behaviors become woven in everyday habits. This is advantageous for a dominant group, but yields advantages of shifting control away from individuals. The factors have profound consequences. Ideology of the dominant group espouses institutionalization of inequality, releases individual members from the sense of the personal complicity. Individual members of the dominant group succumb to institutional pressures. This gives dominant group the advantage in persuading subordinates that all is right with the world. Institutions can legitimize and stabilize inequality by removing compliance with the subconscious realm. Compliance is more readily given to subordinates have been induced to adopt the same values as the dominant group. The benefits that the dominant group derives from the social order obscure beneath the value system make consensual rather than engaging in battle with it. Subordinates, dominant groups prefer to constrain control of subordinates sufficiently to preclude the emergence of serious challenge because it is indivisibility. The institutionalization of vice is so profound, and speciesism makes possible systematic bestialization, which justifies non-criminal putting to death of the other root cause of all oppression. Rossini 6. Most radical post-humanist writing is marked with unquestioned speciesism, the prejudice of attitude of bias in favor of the interests of the member of one of species, discussion of subjectivity, identity, that claims the right to freedom by only social movements has recourse in the enlightened conception of the subject, whose condito sita qua non is the absolute control of that subject over the life of non-human others. This species logic of dominance of human animals over non-human animals has remained in place. We fight racism and heterosexism because we declare discrimination on the basis of this specific and identifiable characteristics, and we should immediately the full transcendence of the human requires the sacrifice of the animal, which makes it possible symbolic economy in which we engage in what Derrida calls a non-criminal putting to death about the humans instead of accepting their vulnerability and morality that they share with other victims as well as their other living beings. The tortures, the systematic bestialization, the implicit and explicit analogies between racism, sexism, homophobia that accompany the above description of the torture method confirms the power of the discourse of species to affect human others depends on the prior acceptance of the institution of speciesism. We all, human and non-human alike, have the stake in discourse of the institution of speciesism, and the alternative is to embrace the standpoint of the animal. This overcomes the humanist bias of the affirmative scholarship, connects to the experience of human and non-human animals, and allows for total liberation by providing understanding of all oppression. Best 9. Postmodern critiques have been influential, but theories cannot employ postmodernism without overcoming limitations. Deconstructionists and social constructionists are typically species who rarely challenge the human-animal dichotomy. Nearly all histories have been written from a human standpoint. Critical, subversive, groundbreaking, or radical probing of historical and social dynamics. Few theories have managed to see beyond humanist bias, adopt a proper analytical and moral retaliation of other animals to grasp importance of non-human animals in human life, providing the perspectives and insights about animals through their historical approach. The animal standpoint analyzes how domination of animals over non-human animals linked to the domination of humans over one another. Animal standpoint leads to understanding commonalities of oppression and alliance politics with the systemic revolutionary standpoint of total liberation, and solves capitalism. The alt resolves the instrumental logic of profit. Best 9. Liberal reformist visions rooted in the delusion of the inherent irrational system can be rendered rational, peaceful, and sustainable repudiates the logic of marketization, economic growth, and industrialization as inherently violent, exploitative, and destructive. The profit imperative overwhelms the moral imperative and pursues the development and accumulation imperatives. Capitalism devours nature, species, human lives, and indigenous cultures. Capitalism did not pioneer the reduction of living beings to things and exploitable resources. Domination of humans, animals, and the earth is ancient institutional sources. When ancient pathologies are conjoined to modern technologies, to an instrumental paradigm that subjects production to mechanized procedures, to a bureaucratic state, and to an economic system solely around the accumulation and profit. And second off is the counterplan. The United States should decriminalize nearly all sex work by decriminalizing the act of performing sexual activity for hire in the United States. And decriminalization protects sex workers and empowers them to fight against abuse. Open Society Foundation 12. Decriminalizing is the best policy for promoting health and human rights. Decriminalization refers to the removal of criminal administrative prohibitions of sex work. Decriminalizing allows workers to access financial services. Decriminalization means workers are likely to live without a stigma, social exclusion, and fear of violence. When sex work is decriminalized, sex workers are empowered to realize their right to work safely and use the justice system to seek redress for abuse and discrimination. And case. Legalization fails, expands street prostitution, women won't participate in the legal sector, and increases violence. Matthews 8. Legalization is the endorsement of the prostitution state itself has been identified as acting like a pimp since it lives off immoral earnings. Legalization encourages street trade. Those who work on streets do not offer a commitment to routinization required in commercialized establishments. Women working in brothels have less freedom in the street space. Claims that brothels author medical inspections, overlooks checks on carried out once a week, does not prevent STDs. Health checks are not given to clients. Legal brothels has accompanied the increase in violence. The claim that legal establishments are violence-free is mistaken. The turnover of women working in brothels will become greater. Many discarded women will cease to make a living of fueling street trade. And the nature of the term prostitute carries gender implications that reassert the status quo hierarchical domination of women. Peterson 90. Why does gender rarely appear in the prostitution research? Sex decline is not a social status, but rather activity activity of persons. By focusing on prostitute research, add double message underlying male domination and control of women. Women are legally stripped of human status, and researchers are locked into misguided investigations on the cap. We'll probably go to this more, but their slate evidence doesn't have any warrants. It probably probably actually turns cap probably helps people think that capitalism is okay and good, and they say only destroying capitalism solves. So if you don't give them their slate evidence, which doesn't say they solve for capitalism, then they don't get the capitalism impact solvency. The affirmative's call for legal reformation is just a guise of leftist legalism. The affirmative results in co-option, subjugation, and a justification of continued exclusion and oppression. Brown 2. Left legalism has turned the left projects against themselves. Legalistic projects are legal placeholders that will be occupied only by people who want to occupy them. No broadly sweeping rearrangement of the social field is intended for risk. Left legalistic moves are merely incremental. Left legalistic project is not a further incrementalize the left's engagement with racism, sexism, and heterosexism, but is infused left politics with their own discursive forms and substituted left with the legalistic debate. Left legalism borrows from liberalism, certain representations of laws depicted as a mere instrument rather than politics. We should not be surprised that if you go to the state with your sexual injury and come out with this woman, go to the state for legitimation of your gay relationship and come out as an embodiment of an idea that sexuality is subject to stable set of regulatory norms. You go to the state with your fear about radical epithet and come out as a member of a permanently hateable racial minority. Left legalism fails to account for the capture and transformation of political aims, and the use of rights discourse attempts to transcend pragmatic evaluation and creates value claims. Such action allows for the state-sanctioned action that fails to address the problems outlined or counter rights that may exist. Kennedy 2. Rights because the discourse treats rights arguments as no more than policy arguments, perform no mediating function, produce no transcendence of the fact value of law politics device, as those are most commonly presupposed discourse. The rights claim intended is something more than just a claim about what is politically or morally best. The speaker seems to presuppose that it's more objective or absolute or conclusive. The speaker may quickly turn to defense of the right as the normal legislative way. When this happens, it reemerges that the right is a value judgment supported by a rhetoric without the mediating power. The speaker seems unaware that there is a counter right. And go back to cap. The app ignores the role that capitalism plays in prostitution. Legalizing prostitution just legalizes capitalist exploitation of prostitutes. Matthews 8. Those who claim women's involvement in a matter of free choice tend to see prostitute as a rational actor operating in an open and equal market in society. Liberals depict women to concerned with self-directed decision makers, emphasizing agency against structure. Those involved are not just passive victims of circumstances. There is a tendency to see them as the term's choice in a way that misrepresents actual processes of decision making involved. The outcome is that the terms which are too voluntaristic and individualistic and involve lack of appreciation of social structural process of the decision to enter any formal framework is subject to different levels of constraints operate at the economic, social, and personal levels. Capitalist labor market and workers are free to sell their labor. Free labor is compelled to sell this labor. Power is starved. These elements restrict choice of occupation even further. The notion of choice, little relevance in the situation in which those engaging in prostitution themselves. Just want to hammer really clear. They say only if they solve cap, they solve their case. We're saying they can't. That's their own slate evidence. So I only got the first one.
Yeah.
Got that for me?
Okay, could we, before we start,
Sure thing.
can we get your cards?
Yeah.
Cards first, then cross X. Sure thing. Cards help out that cross X. Good.
Yeah. It's called New Card 1 and C versus WVU.
Good to go? Cool, starting.
Okay, where is it in your evidence, like on your species aid, that it mentions active prostitution?
Let's see.
And how it links specifically to our plan?
So, our links aren't specific to prostitution, it's specific to the
Do
idea.
animals
just
prostitute themselves?
So,
Can you answer that question? Do animals prostitute themselves? Is that a problem?
It's not, it's like, that's not the problem, right? The problem is the second link card we have is the tittle card talks about how you have an appeal for human rights, right? How there's human trafficking, right? That's your first advantage. The second one is about violence against women, right? That's based off of human rights. We think that focus is bad.
your entire affirmative is like
So we
based
should
on a
never,
humanist perspective.
consider any.
No, it's the focus, right?
No, we
We should
think,
focus
we
on
think
that.
it's important to end oppression, but the way you do it actually just re-legitimizes oppression.
Okay, and how is your counterplan any different than what you're running in your species scale?
So this is an even if argument. So if we're going to say that you should not use the term sex work and that turns your case, or you should not use the term prostitution because it continues the stigma that allows the exploitation of sex workers.
And that's what your counterplan is?
Just decriminalize.
Right, and it's through decriminalization rather than legalization, which uniquely protects those individuals. So if we're going to look at it from the perspective of the 1AC, then this is a better idea. The speciesism K is like, that comes before those other ideas.
So you're not, are you conditional or unconditional?
So conditional,
Conditional.
and the status quo is always an option.
And for your cap ordinance, I guess I didn't get you didn't read any cards on that, but you made some.
I read more on the cap flow, but yeah, I just said your slate card doesn't have warrants, and it probably, a legalization of prostitution probably actually legitimizes capitalism and makes it stronger, and that's the link evidence I read. That's the extra card we sent you.
That's the extra.
Yep.
And for the solvency, how are we, if it were leftist legalism?
Right, so the way that you use the state in order to try to like solve the problems of oppression, it just legitimizes using the state in every instance when oftentimes the state's the actual problem in the first place, or at least the way that we engage it. By engaging the state.
But aren't we engaging the state in a different way through economic?
No, I think you engage the state in a way that you think that the state can be the solution for all these problems, when really the state is often the one perpetuating them. So you're starting with, the state can save us all, it can save our rights, and that's a really bad place to start in a world where oftentimes it's them that's causing the problem. You should engage it in a better way.
Prep.